Hi there, this is John Ruah here from Elevated Planet. I am here today with Ruah Bull. How are you doing?
I'm good today. Delighted to be here, John.
I was very impressed when you did your last blog for us, and that has been very well accepted by the community. And you mentioned when we were doing our previous ramble about the subtle aromatherapies, and that's one of the ones that we always wanted to come back to. So here we are.
Here we are. I'm so happy I get to share this. And the last thing I just want to say here about the Devas is they are the spirit beings that oversee the planets. They're here and they very much want to be a part of the evolution of consciousness on this planet. They helped us at the beginnings. They taught the native peoples, again, medicine and food and where to find water. So they have been companions. Native people say all our relations. Well, the plants and their spirit beings are our relations. So, and they're really coming forward right now, wanting to say, we're here, listen to us, come to us, let us help you. They're ancient beings. Many of them were here before the animals arrived. They care about us. They have extraordinary gifts to give: physical and psychological healing, energetic balancing and expansion, and spiritual guidance. If you're drawn to them, that means you have a connection, and I invite you to explore it. It might very well change your life. I do have a warning. You're not going to be able to bear scented detergent and candles and cleaning products and even the fanciest conventional perfumes. I had a whole bunch of beautiful perfumes, including my sister who gave me Joy, which is like the most expensive perfume. I had to give it away. I literally would smell it and I could smell the artificial things. It was like a tin taste on the back of my tongue. So you will be ruined for all of that. Um, but the trees will smell green, and your car will smell like movement, and the people you care about will smell like love. And as the Devas said to me, welcome, here you are.
Wow. I love that. You know, I say one thing that really strikes me about this overall, and I'm kind of, if I go back and like I put my mainstream head back on again from, 6.5 years, and one of the really tough things, because of the way we've been programmed and conditioned through life, right, is to understand that consciousness exists in everything.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
And that
yes.
is a really tough one for the programming and conditioning, because, we believe we're conscious beings and then there's everything else, right? Okay, animals, yes, definitely conscious, but they're not as important as humans.
Humans, right, right,
And
right.
it's just kind of, it's also warped when you start to, and when and this is what I love about this conversation. Give it the characters, the personalities, the healing, the compassion, the kindness, and the character and the personality. The,
Right.
and the fact that, we as individuated expressions of divine consciousness, they are by the same token individuated expressions of divine consciousness. And there will be those that actually cross paths and with us and we'll know straight away, oh yeah, that's a connection, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And part of what's so sad about how much resistance there is that book, The Secret Life of Plants. I think that came out in the 70s. And there's all this, for people who don't know it, these were scientists in research labs who had different plants, hooked up with all these little electrical monitors. And if somebody came in to the room where the plants were and cut the plant, they would notice the electrical responses of the
Mm,
plant. Well, what happened is the next time that same person walked in, not only was that plant agitated, but the other plants around. So that plant and the surrounding plants were having a response. This is one reason why a lot of the native folks will say, whether you're picking broccoli or a rose, thank the plant. This, I'm doing this for food. Thank you so much. People have heard about, like, for people who eat meat, that that they always, like, thank the animal for giving forth its spirit. I've had some interesting conversations with vegetarian friends of mine, and I totally support that way of living for all kinds of reasons. But I've just said to them, I realize you don't want to kill animals, and I get it, but you need to know that when you eat broccoli, you've also killed a living being. And I'm not saying don't eat broccoli, but give thanks.
right.
This amazing being has just shared his life with you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is quite remarkable when you stop and think about it in those terms. And you know, I, I just find it really, it just enriches your life when you know that we are surrounded by consciousness and you accept that. And, like even have a conversation with your car, be grateful, right? Huh?
Yes, yes. What is it? There was a, oh gosh, I'm going to, please help me remember the name. There was an old book by a guy that was talking about, like, the actual consciousness that's in, supposedly, like, mechanical things like cars.
Mm,
And I'll tell you a story. My husband had this old gray van that I just hated. And I had a very not nice name for it. And every time I got in that van, I had problems. And then people are going to think I'm crazy, but that's okay. It's like, I mean, the electrical would go out, the lights wouldn't work. It's like, I mean, thank God I never had problems with brakes, but like all these things would happen. And and my husband didn't have problems with it. Now he's a mechanic, but he wasn't like fixing it while he was driving. It was a joke.
yeah.
And finally, a friend of mine said, "You're not very nice to that van." I mean, I called it the zombie, and I just thought of it as like this totally dead thing. So she said, "Well, why don't you try giving it another name?" So I decided to call her the gray whale. Again, I am not fibbing here. I did not have a single problem with that old gray van. Once I told her I was really sorry. I'm sorry I mistreated you. You don't deserve it. And I'm now christening you the gray whale. Go figure. It's like, what in heaven's name just happened? This is
Yeah.
this is a Ford van, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. And I know this sounds bizarre and everything, but to many people, but I totally get it. And I do offer gratitude to the two cars that we have between us. I do offer gratitude to them. I don't tell my friends that I offer gratitude to my car necessarily.
Nobody will
Um,
know that we're out on YouTube now.
yeah. And we have wild blackberries that grow in the garden. And as I was picking the blackberries for my little winter stock, every time I would pick one off, I would say thank you.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. That's wonderful. It's, there's a phrase in a lot of Native American spiritualities, many indigenous spiritualities, that spirit is always speaking.
Mm,
And a sense of, you can look around in the physical realm and in the energetic realm, and there are always communications. I mean, this morning I noticed there weren't any birds out at the bird feeder, and when I looked out the window, it's because there was a northern harrowhawk sitting.
yes.
So obviously the little ones were like, "Stay it away." But there's this hawk sitting in my backyard on the stone wall, and I didn't just say, "Wow, that's really cool." It was like, spirit is speaking. what is the communication? And so I know that hawks are oftentimes about vision, perception, spiritual insight. So I did my own processing around, what, kind of communicating with the hawk, thanking it for being there. It turned out it was female, and just asked her what she was saying to me. And then I also looked her up. I always get my initial thing first, and then I go see what somebody says. Spirit is always speaking, and we can be responding. It's a relationship. So here is the gift of those berries, the richness and the juiciness of life,
Mm.
and you're responding by saying thank you.
Yeah.
You know, that it becomes, it's a relationship then. So your world is so rich.
Yes. Yes. It's been a journey again, because you have to switch off from the conditioning and programming of life, right? And I still go down the grocery store and buy stuff, like in
Yeah.
the same way that I always have done. But it kind of does wake you up to something. And this is one of the great things about having met you and having these conversations and rambles with you, Ruah, is that because of your history with the spiritual kind of side of things, particularly with the journeying, right?
Mhm.
Going to the other side of the moon and meeting Alma, of course, not something I've done yet, but maybe if she's around, I'll pop over there sometime. But I love that. It's something I did research. I've read several books on the shamanic journey and things like that. But I think sometimes I lack patience. I'm kind of like thinking, okay, what should I do today? I'm going to go into the Akashic Records. Right. Okay. That didn't work. Okay. Where am I going to go now? Oh, where am I going to? Yeah. Instead of making it into a practice and saying, okay, but I always have this thing where I believe that the stuff that I'm supposed to do will feel right and it will draw
Yes,
me back time and
that's
time
it.
again. So
That's
it's
it.
good to know about these things. But if I try it and it's not drawing me back in, it's because there's a different purpose, you know?
And that is such an important thing, because again, there are so many different practices. And it is true that it's helpful to develop, a discipline. I have a meditation practice I do every morning. And there are times when it is, I think I've spoken about it before, aggravating, boring, or whatever, but I do it because I know if I don't, I miss it.
Mm,
And it's the same thing in the morning. I don't always do a spirit journey, but I have enough time so that after my meditation, I get quiet and open up and see, is there a journey that wants to draw me? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And again, I'm really drawn to the plant oils, like that Native American man that Lynn channeled. But I have not been drawn to herbal medicine. There are, I trained in one form of energy healing, but I've looked into others. They haven't resonated for me. So, what's so wonderful is, like you said, you explore these different things, and then you find the ones that really draw you, that really resonate for you. And
mm,
then you can develop a practice with it. But first, we have to find, it's like people are going to be listening to this, and there are folks, they're not drawn to subtle aromatherapy. And that's fine.
yeah.
There will be another way for them, because there's all these different guides and helpers and teachings that are here to help us find the doorway that's there for us.
Mm,
And
yeah.
it's one of the reasons I have with some of the religions that, again, they oftentimes have multiple practices, but too many of them, in my opinion, says this is the only way. It's
Yeah.
like, no, no, it's not the only way.
No, no, I agree, and I think that's one of my discoveries is that, and not that I've never really been religious, the truth be told, but at the same time, that's what I've learned over these last years is that you don't need a middleman to get to God, right? And that's where religion comes in. And I get the fact that religion creates community, and it can be
Mm-hmm,
beautiful
mm-hmm,
community, and it can be a
mm-hmm,
supportive community. But
mm-hmm,
there are
mm-hmm,
certainly positive aspects,
mm-hmm.
providing they don't, like again, all religions should respect each other,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And at the same time, they should not be saying we are the way to God. They should be encouraging people to find their own way and to help people step into their own power.
Well, and someday I'd love to do one of these with you on spiritual formation, because the truth is, in every real religious path that is deeply spiritual, there's an understanding that there are stages of spiritual formation, and at their best, they're meant to bring you to what we call a mystical state of consciousness, where you're aware of how truth reveals itself in religions and also outside of religions. I love the metaphor of the Holy Spirit, who to me is the feminine aspect of the divine that's out there. She's doing a lot outside of the religions,
Mm.
because there are a lot of people who've never been drawn to one, or who felt they've had to get out of it because it was keeping them constricted. I was able to get on a Christ path because, as I told you, the Jesus that showed up for me was way bigger than the one that I was taught about and was
Yeah.
done with by the time I was 12. So if they're doing their job like a parent, they hold you to then free you. The one thing that I do notice, and I'm thinking more in terms of traditional cultures, maybe this is one reason why the teachers of the Devas are coming in this way too. One of the helpful thing about being in a culture that has elders, that has people who have spiritual wisdom, is, for example, if you're born into a tribe and you have particular gifts,
Yeah.
an elder will see that and will train you. And it's like, I don't call myself a shaman. I can do shamanic counseling, but for me, shamans are native people who've been training for 17 years with a medicine person. But we don't have medicine. A lot of us who are don't fit into the religions and don't have native teachers who are comfortable teaching those of us not in their tribe, we're kind of out there oftentimes without our elders. God
Mm.
help us. Some of us are the ones becoming the elders. And people look at me like I'm an elder, and I'm like, oh my gosh, don't do that to me. Let's go talk to a diva. Um, because it's helpful to have people who've been there, done that, and who can say, this is how you do it. This is when you're falling off the track. This is what it's like. Don't go there. This is how you discern. So it's one of the reasons why I think Elevated Planet is so important, because you're exposing us to different solid teachers and solid teachings, because we don't have a lot of that generally.
Well, one of the things that I've always felt throughout this elevated planet journey is all about the wisdom of the ancients and the forgotten wisdom in the Western world. Now,
That's right.
thankfully, the indigenous folks haven't lost what they have. I
Yes.
mean, some of the Western cultures have tried to squash it out of them,
Yes.
through a variety of methods. But nevertheless, they've managed to keep a lot of it very, secret for a good reason, right?
Yes.
Keep the cards close to the chest because
Yes.
the programming and conditioning of the westernized world would not accept, they would think of them as primitive and barbarians, whereas in reality what's happening is that we are now going to start to learn to get back to where they are.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And thank heavens they've been holding this and waiting to be able to share it. And again, a lot of people can't hear it, but it's amazing how many of us are recognizing that with all the wonderful stuff we have, and I'm glad I have a car, and I'm glad I can go to a grocery store, and I'm glad I have heating in my home. So I
Mm.
give thanks for a lot of the many of the things that, if I break a leg, there's somebody who can rather quickly heal it and heal it well. But my gosh, we lost the heart of attunement to multidimensionality, to the way that everything is spiritually radiant.
Mm.
And that's, I think, what we're in the process of remembering.
Yeah, and that made me think as well in terms of the home, and I'm very grateful for, where I am. It's a converted old Methodist chapel.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, you got a lot of prayer going around. No wonder, no wonder you're doing what you're doing.
It's the Church of Ebenezer. Church of Ebenezer. So we're getting ready for Christmas, and we obviously won't be buying presents, but one of the things that, in fact, I was talking about this on the show just last night, as it happens. But this book here, Drumvalo Melchizedek, okay,
Oh,
right? So this guy is,
I know you love him.
yeah,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons that I learned so much from reading, and I haven't finished reading his books yet. I mean, I'm still like partway through them, but the work that he did with the indigenous tribes all around the world, all these indigenous folks, they knew to expect him. They had the prophecy. They knew he was a Melchizedek who was coming in from off planet to help them to repair the unity consciousness grid that had to be recreated and to move the Earth's Kundalini energy from the Himalayas to the Andes, right?
Oh, right. Wow.
And particularly when they
Wow.
were moving, it got blocked. I mean, it sounds really bizarre, but the Kundalini energy moves within the earth, snake-like, okay?
Right.
And
Right.
the chakras, a lot of chakras in the Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras kind of place, where they got all
Mm,
the pyramids and
mm,
stuff like that.
mm,
There's
mm.
anyway. So they had to get they found it blocked. It blocked at the Panama Canal, right? So that it was stuck there. It got all the way around from the Himalayas underneath the earth. Can you imagine this, right? I mean, again, this sounds so bizarre, but they got to the Panama Canal and it was blocked and they couldn't. So basically what they did, indigenous tribes from around the world got together and meditated for about 3 to 4 days solid, and it cleared the path so that it could continue on down to the Andes. And when I'm reading this, and I'm just thinking about, okay, how do I compare that to my westernized existence and my conditioning and programming? This is amazing. It's miraculous. But it just shows us how much we have lost
That's it.
and
That's
how
it.
much we stand to gain from
Yes.
going back to heart-based unity consciousness from the duality of the mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have so much to look forward to, right? Because the
It's
fall, the fall of consciousness, if we want to call it that, into the duality of the mind is going to make it so much more wonderful to get back into the unity consciousness of the heart, where, we start to recognize everyone and everything as equal, right? As possessing consciousness, to be honoring things. And, again, this is coming back to these subtle aromatherapies, right? To
mhm,
think of these little
mhm.
bottles. I mean, we got a bunch of little bottles of aromatherapy, um, but I've never really thought of them in terms of conscious energy.
Yeah, it's like they're doorways. They're
Right.
literally present as these beings that are here. There's no pressure, there's no forcing, there's no judgment. But if you're drawn, they welcome
Mm,
and they provide a doorway into some kind of a teaching or a healing that is for us, but it does affect your psyche. It's like I'm talking to a bottle of oil. Sounds a little crazy, but you do
yes.
it. And it's like those three people I mentioned, the woman with Jesus, the woman whose home was in fire, that young man who carried the disgust of his family and his beautiful male organs that were just, I mean, I was amazing. I was grateful he didn't have an illness there. Those divas and oils and plants, they were just waiting
Mm,
to be asked to help.
mm.
And those three people, their lives are different. He's not carrying that. She's back in her body. This other woman was told by Jesus, leave that church. That
Mm.
church is not of me. That church doesn't honor my mother and therefore doesn't honor my father. Little bottles. I know.
It's incredible. It's incredible. And when you mentioned the Jesus thing to me as well, because one of the my favorite books over these, Dolores Cannon is one of my favorites, all-time favorites. And she wrote two books about Jesus. One was the Jesus and the Essenes, where he was educated with the Essenes. And again, through QHHT, quantum healing hypnosis, they were actually talking about, it was the perspective of one of Jesus's teachers.
Mm,
Growing up in the Essenes, it was before Jesus was even born. And
mm,
then come the day when Jesus was born, and they were there, and he was describing the scene. And then ultimately, a few years later, and Jesus traveled all over the world with Joseph of Arimathea to be
mm,
educated in all these different
mm,
countries, including in England,
mm,
round down by Glastonbury. Uh,
mm,
but he spent a lot of time with the Essenes, and they were deeply spiritual, and they were very learned, and sort of like offshoots from pre-Atlantis. They'd not lost that wisdom.
mm,
And
mm.
again, they were very guarded with it because they knew that this was powerful wisdom that in the wrong hands would be misused. So
Right,
they never
right.
let that. And in fact, eventually they were wiped out. But the other book that Dolores wrote is They Walk with Jesus. And
Mm,
there was a perspective of I think it was his niece, who loved him, absolutely
mm,
loved him. And at the age of 13, she wanted to walk with Jesus. She wanted to be like one of the disciples.
mhm,
And she was and eventually he let her. I mean,
mm,
she was so passionate about it. She just
mm.
knew, didn't, not a moment of doubt. She knew. And she ended up working in a leper colony for a lot of her life. But her love for Jesus, and it's amazing because you get a real description of what he was like, and the fact that he honored women. We always talk about the 12 male disciples. There were just as many female disciples as there were male disciples.
And I mean, there's an old book called When Women Were Priests. And in the first 100 years, women were just as likely, and couples were just as likely to hold the meetings. But what happened is when they got bigger and they had to go out of homes into Roman space, the Romans would not give space to any group that was led by a woman.
Mm,
So it had to be the men. And then what ended up happening is that became the way it was, that it was the men.
mm,
But I mean, Mary Magdalene, the first of the disciples, I mean, her gospel is absolutely mind blowing. It's one of my favorite gospels. But yeah, I always remember Richard Rohr is a wonderful Franciscan priest who I really like. He's a mystic. And he said, Jesus never said, worship me. He said, follow me.
yes,
He said, be like me.
yes.
Be be as I am, because he came to model the great I am, the consciousness that he's inviting all of us into, brothers and sisters. And my belief that I've learned from other people, but also experience, is that the stones want to help us do this, and the plants and the animals and the stars. There's just so much support for us. And
Mm,
when we open to that. And yeah, there's funky stuff too, which is why the discernment is so important. But my gosh, when we open to it, you're literally in a different world. And you're doing all the regular things. I mean, I'm not sitting in some cave someplace doing magic spells. It's like, I drive my car and I go to the store and, buy my clothes on the internet. And I actually, back in the day, I was like a real hippie, which was
mhm.
great fun. It's great fun. I really like now looking like a really straight lady and, and being who I am, because it's really fun. You're at Whole Foods and there's some kid with something or other, and you know I will oftentimes wear a cross and either my whale or owl. And they're kind of looking at the whale, but then they're looking at the cross. And it's kind of like, let's mix it up. Let's mix it up. Let's mix it up. I love to. I have a big Uranus in my chart, so I kind of love going like whack. Let's knock out the stereotypes and find out now who these teachers really are and how they're still present.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
yeah, yeah. This is well, we could go on forever. I
Oh, I
know, but this is
know, I
great
know,
fun.
and I would just say again about Yeshua Ben Joseph, because I do again of all the I give thanks to a lot of things, including the consciousness of the old chapel. You know, that's something I do every day. Okay, so much gratitude for this beautiful home. But also, I always say the same thing to Yeshua Ben Joseph White Arrow, as I know him. Right, that's how I know him.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I also say to my sister in spirit, Faye Vale, who is this beautiful artist who was a galactic artist who used to channel galactic art, and I'm surrounded by her work here. And
Oh,
she was a beautiful human being. Unfortunately, she passed away about 14 months ago.
oh,
Um,
oh.
but very generously, her daughter gave a couple of beautiful works of art. But let me show you this. I can just
I'd love to see them.
let
Yeah,
me just lift the camera off here and see if I can get this. So, this is Faye's work here. Unfortunately, a little bit of yeah, it's too much reflection on that.
but I can see it. Look at the faces. Oh my,
So
look at
this
that.
this was so bearing in mind, Faye was right-handed, okay?
Yeah.
She did this with her left hand, which she could barely control, and she wouldn't even have to look at what she was drawing to do this.
Oh my gosh.
And when she'd finished, she'd then have to look at it and work out which way round it was supposed to be.
Oh my gosh. Is that
Right?
something?
There's another one. That was one. There'll be no reflection off that one because that one is called Focus, and she sent me that one specifically. Oh, let's get it right.
This one here. Oh, look at the.
That one in
Oh,
the middle in the
wow.
gold frame. That one.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Oh,
while I always honor Yeshua Ben Joseph, I also honor my sister in spirit, Faye Vale, because I know she's still with us. And I'm surrounded by her energy and her work. And in fact, she did galactic readings as well. So I have my own little galactic art picture over here and a breakdown of exactly what it means, and it even includes light language. It was amazing, honestly. I wish she was still with us in the physical, but that's me being selfish because I know over there she's doing a very important job as well. So
oh.
anyway, yeah. So that has been really, really interesting. And I could ask you questions about this all day long, but at the end of the day, and I love that thing about the bell harmonics on the chakras as well. You
Yeah,
know, that's
yeah.
that's the this because everything is harmonics as well, right?
That's it. I mean, I think didn't I can't remember who was saying it because, of course, because of you now, my whole YouTube feed is, tarot and astrology. And I think there's one poor little pathetic politics things that comes up that I let my husband watch when I'm like out of the house. It's like, I don't want to do any of that. Let me get out. But several of them have been talking about how the healing of the future is going to be all vibrational.
Oh, sure.
And the oils, this is vibration. That when he was talking, the teacher was talking about that our capacity to learn through olfaction,
Mm,
well, that's also vibrational. So it really feels like there's this whole thing opening. And I have a number of friends who were doctors who trained in holistic medicine. And holistic medicine kind of got squashed for a while, but now here in the States, as our medical system continues to collapse. I mean, all the doctors I work with are so stressed out. I mean, their hearts are breaking
mm,
because they can't do what they're meant to do. But now holistic physicians are starting to reconnect again, and they're using all these ancient modalities that are it's like it's thrilling. So it's really
yeah.
becoming integrative again instead of that. It started out alternative and they always say traditional Western, but that's ridiculous because the alternative is the traditional. And then it became integrative for a while where you use both. And then there was kind of like this split where once again the alternative got sort of pushed away. It's coming back
Mm.
because you can't always get in to see your doctor. So then you
No.
better know how to, what herb to use, for example.
Yeah, and interestingly, I mean, over here in the UK, the medical system here is also falling flat on its face, and it is really in a mess.
Mm,
And these things are collapsing, but I think they're collapsing because they're supposed to collapse.
I agree.
You know, I
I
think
agree.
as with many things in the corporate world are due to collapse, the
I agree.
financial systems, the political systems, they're all due to collapse. And they need to collapse because they need to be recreated. And I had this conversation going back a couple of years ago with a lady, and I've mentioned her name to you before, Aveen. Aveen Murray
Mm,
is her name.
mm,
She's over in Ireland, and she, again, is a shamanic practitioner, and she does all sorts of multimodal healings.
mm.
And one of the things that came up for her at some stage was that she asked the question, there are so many healers. There are so many healers coming online now. She says, yes, because that is what is needed in the future. This is the era we're heading to because the mainstream medicine as we have known it, there's good stuff there. There's definitely good stuff. But at the same time, the pharmaceutical companies have been running riot and dismissing the natural remedies because they don't make a profit off them. Yeah.
Exactly.
And yet the new old modalities coming back from that have been around for thousands of years and are so healing and free of charge a lot of the time.
Yes, yes. It's I know we need to end, so I'll just throw this out on BBC Select. I saw a show a while ago called The First Inventors that came out of, I think, good heavens, I believe it's Australia
Mm.
or New Zealand. Okay, now that is an unforgivable sin to confuse New Zealand and Australia. Both of those people will like want to shoot me. I apologies. This is my 73-year-old brain, not my disrespect for your countries. Um, but part of it was they were looking at native peoples and all the remarkable scientific things they'd done. I think it was Australia because they have people who were like fire keepers, who were training the Australian fire departments how to do fires. That after Australia just was like,
Mm.
oh my God, they just went
Oh,
through
yeah,
hell. Remember a few years ago?
I
The
do.
reason I'm saying it is that there is a woman there who is native, who, with the help of a white man, put together a 3 volume set of her knowledge of herbs. John, 11,000 herbs. 11 in her head,
Wow.
in her dream time, in her
Yes.
ancestral. And they did, so it's really fun to watch this. And there's this German guy who's a biochemist over there working with her, looking at these herbs. There are compounds in those words that Western science knows nothing about. And he is working with her not to co opt it, to take it so he can become a millionaire, but to bring the wisdom of her people out to all of us.
Yes. And
I
if
was doing the happy dance. I had to like get up and just like, Yahoo!
yeah, and that's beautiful, isn't it? And that's the thing. Again, talk about dream time, right? And this is the thing as well, that so much of this wisdom has been retained not by writing it down and all this. It's actually just retained, gone passed down from generation to generation.
That's right.
Um, and I know that the Aboriginals regard this as dream time, right? The physical
Yes.
life is dream time. Then at the end of it, you wake up from the dream and you go back home to the real life.
That's right. That's right. I'm going to find a poem that the next time we talk, I'll bring it. It's a gorgeous poem about Lawrence Vanderpost and the Aboriginals and how they were talking to him about, speaking of vibration, listening to the music of the stars. And he said, well, he couldn't hear them. And they're like, what do you mean? And so the poem does a beautiful job of how these little wizened old men take him out under the stars and say, because they thought maybe because the
Yeah,
was too loud, okay, and he's there going, nothing. And part of what's so moving is in the poem, it talks about how they accompanied him back to the fire as if they were accompanying somebody who they realized was like really, really ill.
yeah, yeah. Wow, wow.
And we are being prepared to be able to hear the stars.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
We get to do this together and
We're
support
going to
one
do
another.
elevated planet retreats where we're going to go and talk to the stars and we're going to
I
listen
think
to them.
that'd be fabulous. I'll be on a plane and come on over and attend.
We're going to connect heaven and earth. We're going to just all celebrate life together
I love it. I love
across
it. I
all
love
the
it.
different dimensions. Yeah, it's going to be beautiful. One final thing I'm going to say before we sign off is one thing that you suggested, Ruah, is that if
Oh,
anybody within the community, anybody sees the videos and they would like to dig deeper, us to dig deeper on any subjects that Ruah will undoubtedly from her spiritual past, and I'll kind of include your bio as well with this so that people can see. Um, then we would be more than happy to explore that in a future Rua's Ramble.
thank you for remembering that. I'd love to do that. And again, just send out everything. And if we don't know anything about it, we won't do it. And maybe we'll find somebody that we could bring in who does.
Yeah.
But
Or,
as you,
or we can just make it up. That's my job. Only kidding. I don't do that.
now, see, the problem is that's going to be somebody will take that in a clip and they'll put it on Fox News that you're making this up, John. So it's like thanks a lot, but it's yeah because and I love your response was like because this helps to build community
Yeah.
that this isn't just one way but it's two ways and again as always we're talking about our experiences and our perspectives. Somebody might listen and say, I have a really different sense of Jesus or the star people or whatever. But to get the conversation going so that we're all thinking and reflecting and sharing and honoring this exquisite diversity that is also part of one, I love it. It's like a great symphony orchestra.
Doesn't get any better than this, Rua.
Doesn't get any better. All right, love. Well,
All
listen, you
right.
take care.
Yeah,
And by
you
the way,
too,
I
Rua.
enjoyed seeing your room because you do have stuff written all over the walls. You
Oh, I
told me
do.
that.
Yes. 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 It's I've been most of this has been with me for over 6 years, like when I first started scribbling this stuff down.
We'll have to do a time when we're just like wandering around John's room. That would be a fun one, right? Instead of Architectural Digest, we'll
Yeah.
go look at your room. Much more fun. Take care,
Yes.
dear. All
Yes.
right, great
Okay.
to see
Take care,
you.
Rua. And bye,
Bye,
everyone.
hon. Bye, everybody.